My name is Shaquella Johnson. I work at the Dane County Rape Crisis Center as the Multicultural Outreach Advocate and Specialist. We're here today with these lovely, phenomenal Black women here to discuss kind of what they do, how they do it, and drop some knowledge on just like some of the Black women who've been doing such amazing work here in the Dane County community surrounding anti-sexual violence and supporting young Black women and girls on just getting the support and love that they need. So I will have these three women introduce themselves. If they can just give you, if you guys can just say your name, pronouns if you feel so inclined to, and just like what you do with us for people who may not know it. I don't know who wants to start first. So I'm looking at
it. So my name is Nestic Morris. I use she, her pronouns, and I do outreach at the Wisconsin Coalition Against Sexual Assault. So we don't provide direct service, but we have 60-something member programs around the state that I provide outreach for. And I also do trainings around Black women, sexual assault, Black girls.
They're really good trainings.
I am Lilada G, and I'm the founder and president of Defending Black Girlhood.
My name is Dane Pellebon. My pronouns are she and her. I am the co-executive director of the Rape Crisis Center, and I also manage the direct service to the clients in Dane County.
She manages me.
Yes.
As well. So I brought you guys here just because I really wanted to, for Black History Month, once focus on some of like this activism that you guys have been doing. I think a lot of times when people think of social justice work, they don't immediately think of women's issues and they don't immediately think of Black women's issues and then also sexual violence. And you guys are existing in all three of those arenas. So I just really wanted to take time to just highlight all of those things and highlight that work and have a really good conversation on what brought you to doing this difficult work and just kind of things that you guys have learned along the way. I also realized I did not invite people to post questions. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, ideas, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be checking them throughout this conversation as well. I forgot to say that. But along with like the first thing, what brought you guys to doing this work? Because I feel like it's hard. It's hard work. And like kind of what made you want to do this specific work in this arena? I don't know who wants to start first. Or we can keep the same order.
So is that me first?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Nestic.
So I came to the coalition from a career change. I was in youth development, AOTA, in criminal justice, and I was just over it. I had done all of the work that there could be done at the Boys and Girls Club. Like I legit started from a teenager working there to the executive director. And so it was just time for a change. But no matter what arena I was in, I was always concerned about the safety and well-being of Black girls and Black women. And so being at the coalition, I'm at a more macro level and like policy level, and we're not there. And so being a part of the coalition, I get to be a part of the safety and well-being of Black women and girls at a more policy level. So that's kind of how I got there.
Thank you.
And I kind of feel like I fell into this work. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And in 2006, I released my book, I Can't Live Like This Anymore, that talked about my life experience surviving and my healing journey. And after the book came out, it just kind of started creating a life of its own. I wasn't writing it to create a platform or to usher myself into this work. It kind of pulled me in. And I think just in general, just the whole foundation of my wanting to do healing work, period, really was inspired by my children. Like just realizing that I had done all that I could do to protect my children from reliving my experience and the experience that my mother had, etc. But unless I healed, they were still going to be getting the residuals of my pain. And they really sparked me on going on a healing journey before I could love myself enough to do it.
Well, that's beautiful. I find that's true for a lot of people in this work, right? So, yeah, ooh, that just really touched me.
Thank you.
Dana, did you wanna?
Yeah, and similarly to Lilada, you know, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault and intimate partner violence and adult sexual violence. So when you are a survivor, it becomes a part of you, and so you learn to talk to people, you learn to share with people kind of what you're going through. You have friends that come to you. Um, there are whisper networks of women across the world to keep each other safe. And so I was a part of whisper networks in the 90s, where we were saying, hey, this is where you go. This is where you're not safe. These are people who we've run across that are okay and not okay. I worked for many years in housing, and intimate partner violence and sexual violence were very prominent in dealing with those issues with, for me, with Black women in particular, because that was a good portion of the clientele that I was working with. So um, I got the opportunity to come and work at the Rape Crisis Center to put the grassroots work that I had already been doing um, to more of a organizational standpoint. And I appreciate that opportunity because it gives me a platform that I did not have to be able to do work more concentrated for women and for Black women in particular.
I think you guys, both you, Dana and Leda, like really highlighted, I think, something that um, is really important of like how we get into this work. It's not something we probably typically plan. And you too, Nestic, of like, we don't really, when I started this job, right, I didn't really realize what I was going to be doing here, right? And I think similar to the Leda, like why I did this work and why Dana also is because of my own personal experience of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, and wanting to really support my community and have those conversations that we just don't have in general, but especially in the Black community, we don't talk about the abuse that happens. So how have you guys, I don't know if Dana or Leda, you feel comfortable talking about that? Have you guys managed um, feelings, emotions, your mental health, your mental well being as being survivors while also helping other people through their healing journey?
So I can actually talk about something that happened a couple of days ago. So I posted a picture on Facebook of me as a middle schooler. Um, and and it was a picture I hadn't seen in years. And people were commenting on it. And I was like, oh, haha, this is great. Because I had this crazy asymmetrical haircut, and I was like, look at me back in the day. And then as people started commenting on my age and how young I looked and how innocent I was, I started remembering where I was at that moment. And where I was at that moment was weekly being assaulted by a neighbor. And I was triggered, and I had no idea that that was what was going to put me there. And we talk a lot about healing is not a straight line, it's a continuum. So it has taken me two days just to be able to get back into my body. So I haven't been able to sleep. I've been jittery. I've been triggered, essentially. So the healing journey, as I experience it, goes up and down all the time. And being able to know what it is that I need to do to take care of myself. And that's a lot of what it is that we talk to people about, especially at RCC. It's not, we are here to heal you, because healing looks different for every person. It's, we're here to give you skills to be able to manage when out of the blue, something happens, right? And something catches you off guard. So I'm lucky in that, honestly, I have an amazing staff where, you know, I actually contacted Shaquella because we were supposed to have a meeting yesterday at noon. And I was like, you know what? I can't do this. I can't. And she said, thank you very much. Please take care of yourself. I appreciate you. And that's what I needed at that moment. So, you know, part of that healing journey is knowing what it is that you need in the moment, knowing what it is that you can do to keep yourself safe, because a lot of what sexual violence is and creates is a feeling of not being safe and not being protected and not being cared for. And I can't count on other people to do that for me. So I have to learn skills to be able to do that for myself. So I left my house and spent many hours by myself in an office, just me, myself, and I. And I was able to get myself together after literally 2 days. And that's okay. That's the other thing, is that it's okay. These things happen. This is all a part of that continuum in healing. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing that I'm doing that is wrong. It is literally just, this is how trauma works. And being able to respect that place for yourself and reach out for what you need and take care of yourself as best as you can. Yeah, I think those are all the words I have on that right now.
Those are good words. Really good words. I don't know, Leda, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think it is all about the perspective and being in tune when you know something is off, you know. And I think for me, one of the things was redefining triggers. I used to feel like there was a weakness if I was triggered. And I've kind of turned that around to really say that triggers help me see what is yet to be done on my healing journey. And so I've learned to kind of lean into triggers as opposed to away from them. And I think one of the things that's helped me greatly has been my art. And that's really how art came back into my life in this season. Was I was working with some young survivors. I'm talking about kindergarten, first grade girls. And I couldn't pass that pain through. And art was the only thing, and art for my own sake, was the only thing that became a healing balm for me. You know, drawing in the morning, drawing in the evening after doing the work really became my daily prayer. And that has really helped me to pass through the pain and help to grow, you know. But like Dana said, being in tune with yourself, not being thrown off when those things happen, and not being judgmental of yourself, but really saying, now that this is coming to me like this, it's saying that I'm ready to deal with the emotions. I'm ready to deal with that trauma now, and then doing the things in that moment that you need.
Nestor, did you have anything to add on to that?
I think they covered everything. Just there are days where you are riding the healing wave, and then there are other days when the healing wave is riding you, and it's important to honor both of those spaces. So
Mhm.
I love the wave. I think something when I first got into this work as a little young buck, not that I'm not young still, skipping over that. About 2.5 years ago, I was not prepared for how much of how much healing I have not yet had, and how much I was going to be consistently tested and triggered um, throughout the advocacy work that I've been doing. So something that comes to mind for me is just like, and I had a question for you guys about, as far as like tips or things that you guys feel like would be helpful for young people who are getting into this work, is like, how do you um, stay motivated? I think, right? Like, I got in, and it's hard to be the advocate of a Black woman while you are systemically being oppressed for being their advocate, and then they're being systemically oppressed for being a Black woman in this world that does not want Black women to exist.
Mhm. I think you have to go into this with eyes wide open, because the caution is that if you're not where you need to be in your healing journey to do this work, you're going to bleed over the troops. And so being really clear, if this is something that I can do right now, and even if it's something you've done, can I continue to do this? And I think not, I never get to the point where I feel like I might not need a booster shot of some type. And I've done everything. I've done therapy, medication, all of those things. And I remain open that I might need any of those things at any time. So I think if you ever get to the point where you feel like I've arrived and you believe your own hype, then you're in danger of being hurtful to other people.
That's a word, Lilada.
Pastor Lilada.
Coming through. I really do like that idea of just like consistently checking in with yourself. Like you have not always arrived, right? And you're not always going to be right. And I do think as a person who got into this work probably before I should have, to be transparent, right? I was not in a good space. Like I was fresh off of a recent assault. And I remember just like using work as a distraction, which is I think something that a lot of people do, especially in this work where it's always something to do. There's always something to fix. There's always somebody who needs help. So I think it's really great that you guys are bringing it back to making sure that you're taking care of yourself consistently in like ways to make sure you're checking in with yourself to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Because if you are not healthy or well or centering yourself, you can't then center in a community or help in doing that. So I think that was really, really helpful. The other question I had for you guys, maybe you can speak on like, has there been, I guess, like lessons you guys have taken from this work or obstacles that you guys have had that has really informed how you guys navigate your career now, in your journeys now? I don't know, Nestic, do you have any thoughts?
You just gotta show up. I just feel like in the obstacles that I faced in like the last 2 or 3 years have been simply anti-Blackness from my colleagues, not in my building colleagues, but like these people that I'm supposed to be in the fight with, that kind of thing. And I still just have to show up Black, right? I don't know how to be anything other than Black, right? And so being able to be like, this is just who I am. And I know that that's just a part of my personality. Like you're gonna take this Blackness whether you want it or not. But the anti-Blackness I have had to learn to navigate from both white women and non-Black women of color has just been, it's been eye-opening, and it's been, I don't want to say it's mind-blowing because I don't put anything past people, but it's mind-blowing that I have to learn to navigate this from women who are supposed to be in this fight with me. And I think learning how to navigate that, I have to lean on Black women. For example, there have been white women in our field who have had entire meetings around what needs to be done, essentially what needs to be done for me, right? Like I was on, I did my training, some white colleagues went back to their assistant directors and supervisors and tell them that I made them uncomfortable, and that I made one quote was, I made them feel like shit for being white, and just a bunch of other foolishness. And so there was a regional meeting behind like, what can we do to make Nestic not make us white women feel uncomfortable? And so I had to have a conversation with my executive director and assistant executive director, like, this is the scope of my life, right? And so I need y'all to have, now I'm gonna say something, be clear. I'm gonna say something to her, but you need to step in and say something because we're talking about white allyship, white co-conspirators, or whatever. And so I wanted to ride down on her, right? But I had to have a conversation with her and like explain to her, you don't get to do that, right? Like you don't get to have a whole meeting, put me on the agenda and tell me what, how that works. And so she backtracked and, all of those things. But it's just anti-Blackness because my white colleagues, they don't have these kinds of issues when they're talking about prevention or intervention, things like that. And if I was talking about something else, it would be a whole different thing. And so I've learned to just lean on Black women. I've called Shaquella, I've called you, I've called the executive director of culturally specific programs, and I've called the Black women on my board, right? Like, hey, I just want you to know that this happened. I know that you know that this happened, but I'm in a training. I just got tried. And if they said that I said it, I said it. Right? Like there was a Black woman in one of my trainings who came to me and was like, I know that because I was livid. She's like, I know that you're mad, but I need you to let me carry that energy for you. And you need to be able to go back and finish this training. And so I'm just learning to lean on other Black women. Now, I don't know this woman from a can of paint. Shout out to Verlika in Milwaukee for literally saving my job because I was about to go ham. And so I just learned to lean on other Black women.
Oh, that's really good. I remember us talking about that before because when I first started RCC, I leaned on you a lot, girl.
Yes.
Leaned on you quite a bit. I think that's something that we don't talk about as far as like that being really important, I guess, in any field that you are in, but specifically in the sexual violence field, which is primarily filled with white women. And there are culturally specific programming that's happening more and more and more, but it's still primarily dominated by white women. I think it's really important for Black women to know that they can lean on their colleagues, Black women who are there to support them, to aid them, to respite them, to vent, girl, vent, chest when things are happening. I don't know. Dana, Lilada, did you guys have anything to add?
Well, I'd like to just say thank you to all the white women in the field of sexual assault prevention and work. Because of them, they really inspired me to start my own work because I could not work for a white woman no more. I had to start my own thing because, as Nestic said, I want to just add that other level on it. It's not just anti-Blackness, it's anti-Black womanness, very clearly and very specifically. And it got so oppressive, even from folks just lying and just a lot of things that Nestic is saying. I experienced those types of things, and I just had to get to the point where I said, I will no longer work for a white woman. I'm going to have my own power to be able to make my own decisions about what I do, what I won't do, so that I could stay in this work. Because with some of my time, my tenure of doing statewide work within Wisconsin specifically, there were times where there were absolutely no Black women sexual assault advocates and no train stopped behind that. If there was a time when other groups, and sometimes people don't want to accept that anti-Blackness is a thing. They just want to say, oh, we're just racist. No, it's anti-Black because throughout that time, there was other, ethnicities that were covered. And as a matter of fact, if there were some that were not covered, the world would have shook. But there was no concern about the fact that Black women weren't. And the truth is, we don't last long in this field because it is so oppressive. And part of the reason it's so oppressive is one, white women, white privilege. But the other part is back to what we said before, we all enter this work with some level of healing and some level of unhealing. And when you work in the domestic violence field, the badger the badge of honor really is that you're a survivor of domestic violence. Conversely, when you work in the sexual assault field, most people do not talk about that. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of shame from people who work in this field over even identifying as a survivor of sexual abuse. And so you have a lot of survivors who have been through some things. And because they haven't healed, everything they do comes through that lens, and it's just amplified. So, you know, again, I have to thank white women because you pushed me to where I needed to be.
I love that. Thank you, white women, for pushing Lilada to where she needed to be, because if it wasn't for her, Lord knows where some of these Black girls will be without her phenomenal work in Dane County doing the things that needs to be done. Dana, did you have anything to add to that?
So, you know, I am in a unique position in that I'm a Black woman that that is now co-leading a traditionally white agency. And I find myself being the only Black face in a lot of meetings when I am representing this agency and when I am representing what it is that we're doing, and when I am doing trainings, and when I am leading teams and pushing those persons to recognize and understand that they have created a space that it's actually unwelcoming to me, to anyone that I would bring in, and I don't want to bring people in to spaces that are unwelcoming. And so I am having to, on a regular basis, educate at every meeting that I'm at, push the narrative that you can't just expect Black folks to just walk into a space that you have purposely kept them out of, and then on top of that, made unwelcoming once they come in, and then disregard the words that are coming from their mouth because that's not how you see it. And I get that pushback from white women, from non-Black women of color, and it's exhausting. I really want people to hear it is exhausting, because this is every single day. This isn't just every once in a while I have this experience. It is every day I have this experience. So every day I have to unpack the trauma that comes to me. I have to unpack the hostility that comes to me, because let me tell you something. When you stand up and you say, this is how this needs to be, and this is how this needs to go, people are hostile. People who all the way through, all of a sudden, are now all of a sudden going, well, you know, yes, I agree with this, but you know, there's the thing and there's the this, and all it is anti-Blackness and the unwillingness to change, and the unwillingness to be able to look at yourself and say, here are the things that I need to be at inquiry with. And one of the things that I do routinely is I go and I listen, especially to the youngins. I'm on Twitter a lot, not really to talk because you know, I don't really have much to say on Twitter, but I listen to the young activists that are out there because I need to learn, and I need to be at inquiry with myself, and I need to make sure that I am pushing forward the things that will very clearly not contribute to anti-Blackness. I need to make sure that my language is correct. I need to make sure that the people that I am advocating for, the ones that are most marginalized, the ones that are most impacted, that I am not advocating incorrectly. And the only way that I can do that is to listen. I just don't know these things. I have to go out and I've got to study. I've got to read. I've got to listen. And if I, as a Black person, have to do that, think about what you got to do as double as not a Black person. And and put yourself in that space of always having to learn, because I always have to learn. I always have to learn as a light-skinned Black person that has that light-skinned privilege. I always have to make sure that I am not overstepping my bounds. So the one thing that I want everybody to know is that we don't know it all. We don't know that much. We are always learning. We are always getting better. We are always dismantling the yokes of oppression that have been put onto us for generations. So take yourself out of the picture, decenter yourself, and center the persons that need to be centered.
Yes. Ooh, all of that. I feel like one reason why I was pushed into this movement, similar to Lilada, is like I was tired of whenever people hear about sexual violence, people automatically think about just like the cute little white girl who was abused, and it was never about the numerous Black and brown women who are being abused, assaulted, harmed, killed, forgotten, kicked out consistently. And I think that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize, is like how difficult it is to navigate in a space that consistently decenters you and decenters your experiences, and not even decenter it, but kick it to the curb and don't care about it. So I really, all of that. And I guess, I don't know if you guys can probably speak on, for people who are wondering why, because some people may be curious why you need to center Black women in this conversation. Because I feel like a lot of pushback is like, why Black women? Why do we need to center their experiences and their voices? I hear that quite frequently. There's other people. So I don't know who would like to maybe answer that question for people who may be.
Sure, I'll jump in on that because I've been really Black forward with my work. And a lot of that came out with the work I started doing in the state of Wisconsin and seeing the lack of Black women advocates and the perspective that Black women needed to heal and Black girls needed to be protected. And it made me think, okay, there's not many of us doing this work. So while I'm doing it, I'm going to be very Black specific. And everybody is fine because I grew up in Madison. I can deal with any kind of person, which I think is a positive thing. But once I started being very specific about working with Black women, there was an issue. About 6 years ago, I started Black Women Heal Day, and I would hear, well, what about white women? What about other women? And I was like, as long as we were in the corner, in the back, in the dark, no one had a problem with it. But then when you bring the conversation about Black women and Black girls, now all of a sudden, people get quite uncomfortable. And I even get that sometimes from Black men, so I think seeing the lack of it, understanding through my own personal healing journey and being able to understand that, I started doing my family tree of sexual abuse, and I realized that my daughter was the only woman in my direct lineage on my mother's side that had not been sexually assaulted since they stole us from Africa. And as I continue to do more work and more research, I realized that this wasn't my personal story. This is the story of every single Black woman in America, in Puerto Rico, in Dominican Republic, in Brazil, in Cuba, all of us, that once you get to slavery are from that lineage of sexual assault and sexual harm and sexual abuse on every scale. And so when you look at it, and one thing I used to say when I was doing some of the more statewide national work within organizations, I would say, as a matter of fact, not only should we not have a lack of Black-centered programs and advocates, it should be at the top of our list. When we look at the sheer numbers of Black women who are directly and indirectly impacted by sexual assault, we need to be on everybody's agenda, as a matter of fact.